Okay. We have a meeting of the Audit Committee of EFC, and I would ask for a roll call.
Chair Krasinski,
I'm here.
Director DeMarquis,
Present.
Director Corcoran.
Here.
Director Corcoran, can you? Oh, thank you. And I note that Director Zarowski is absent, but you have a quorum.
Thank you. Great. We have draft minutes from April 24, 2025. Looking for, somebody to make a motion, and then we can see if we want to approve it or discuss changes.
I'll make a motion on the draft minutes.
I'll second.
Terrific. Any discussion, or are we okay with it? And if we're okay with it, somebody makes a motion to approve.
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Terrific. So all in favor of approving the draft minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The charter of the audit committee has not changed, and I hope you've taken a look, at least in the last few years. And if you are okay with it, maybe make a motion to approve it again, or if you see something that you'd like to discuss, raise it now.
I'll make a motion to approve the charter and review it annually.
Great.
And I'll second the motion.
Terrific. All in favor of approving the charter for another year? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we have Marty on the line and Allie, I think. Allie, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, great. There you are. I didn't see you there. You're blending in. Terrific. Thanks for being here, both of you. So from KPMG, we have the audit you've sent us, gone through it, and the review of the financial statements. And we'd like to hear what you have to say. Give us the overview and we'll discuss.
Sounds good. Thank you, Charlie. Good morning, everyone. This is Marty. I apologize, I'm not there in person. I'm on the western side of the state here in Buffalo at the present moment. But as you see, Allie is out there holding down the fort. And so we'll present the results of the 2025 audit of the financial statements that went very well as they have in many past years. This is my first time back after a two-year cool-off period, and obviously stepping in for to help cover for Jeff Coach, who we expect back hopefully in the not too far distance. So anyways, on to our presentation. So there are two primary documents. I know there's probably a few that were sent out to you, but the two primary documents are the basic financial statements that include the management discussion and analysis, the financial statements themselves, footnotes to the financials, and some other required supplementary information, all of which was either directly audited, the financial statements themselves and the footnotes, and then as it relates to the supplemental schedules and the MD&A, we evaluate that in the context of the financial statements, make sure that they're consistent and tie out, things of that nature overall. And so, as you can see, if we advance the slides, and I apologize, I cannot see the slides. If we're looking at page 3, audit results, that's starting there. As you can see, we will be issuing the financial statements, and we will be issuing what we call a clean or unmodified audit opinion on the financial statements. We conduct the financial statement audit as usual in accordance with the U.S. generally accepted auditing standards. Those are the standards that we independent auditors employ, and then also we execute the audit in accordance with government auditing standards, and government auditing standards has an incremental audit opinion that we issue that evaluates compliance with internal controls and laws and regulations in the context of a financial statement audit. So there's some extra steps that we do to make sure that there aren't any material instances of noncompliance as it relates to financial reports and internal controls. And if there are, we are required to report those to you. We did not identify any such exceptions as you will hear as we present our audit results and our required communications here. The other report that we issue is an examination report over the compliance of the investment policies of EFC in light of those policies that are put out by the New York State regulations, and making sure that the actual investments held are consistent with those that are set out in those policies. Again, no exceptions from that perspective. We expect to issue our financial statement opinions here in the next, let's call it 24 hours or so, as we wrap up some of our last remaining steps of the audit process, which is really just the final tie-out, proofreading, things of that nature, which brings me to a standard public service announcement that I like to usually make. The financial statements that were sent to you are expected to be identical to what we ultimately issue. However, we will do a final proofread or two, as we always do. And certainly, if there's any typos or things that anyone identifies, you're welcome to share those with us, or obviously with the management team there in person, so that we can incorporate those into the final report that's ultimately released tomorrow. And then a little bit later on down the road, we'll finish the procedures as it relates to what we call the single audit or the uniform guidance audit. That's the audit of the federal funds that are expended each year. But we've kind of conducted some of those initial procedures in the context of our financial statements, and obviously have nothing to report or any exceptions of that nature as it relates to the single audit based on our procedures performed to date, which is good. In terms of some of the things that we typically report on, like exceptions or concerns, we usually kind of categorize those as corrected or uncorrected audit misstatements. Situations where we're evaluating an underlying transaction or the books and records and comparing those to what's reported in the financial statements. And if there's any differences or exceptions between those, we report those to you as an audit misstatement. We did not identify any such audit misstatements. So in other words, the general ledger and the draft financial statements that were given to us at the outset of the audit that we used to conduct our scoping and procedures are identical to what ultimately will be in these financial statements. And that really kind of speaks to the rigor and the sound internal controls and processes and work that people put into not only preparing the financial statements themselves, but closing the books on an annual basis at the ledger level, and that typically is also true over the course of a year, because if you're not doing it well throughout the year, it's really hard to do at the end of the year. And what really is a fairly tight turnaround to issue the financial statements for a March 31 year end and get them out the door without any exceptions by the end of June is pretty impressive. And I know that's done year in and year out, but I think it's important just to highlight that once again. And that does lead into that next bullet here on page 3 in the far right-hand tile. Deficiencies, none noted. So not a big story there, just a couple words. But I think that just to add some color, going back to it, as part of our audit procedures, we are obviously in a position to observe the existence of internal controls, the kind of accounting control activities that occur to pull together the financial statements. For example, reconciliations, whether it be bank reconciliations or account reconciliations and other control activities, approvals for transactions, maintaining adequate support of financings and transactions, et cetera, are all in place based on the procedures that we performed, and therefore no deficiencies were identified. So I think that that's really the telltale behind when we say we have a clean or unmodified audit opinion on the financial statements. It's really that feedback there that that really highlights the success of the audit. And I think that this is probably the right point to give it a tip of the cap to the management team. Emily, Albert, Chris, all the folks that participated in pulling together the financial statements. It's certainly not an easy process. And then when the auditors show up and ask a lot of questions over a course of a month and a half or 2 months, it looks like a good, clean, easy process, and it certainly was in all respects. But it certainly takes a lot of effort and a lot of work from the management team to have a strong audit. So hats off to them for delivering another successful audit here. So if we turn to slide 5, that's a chart. The next couple of pages include a chart that highlights all the required communications that we as your auditors are supposed to formally acknowledge to you as the Audit and Compliance Committee, the Audit Committee, in your role, governing this process. That letter X, or that X that you see there, means that it's either not applicable or no matters noted or no matters to report. And the check boxes are things that are, there's something to report, and it's not to say that it's bad. It's just there's an incremental slide that provides a little bit more color. And in some cases, we'll touch on those. In the interest of time, we won't go through every slide. We know that you had these slides in advance. But I will just take a moment to just go through, Allie and I will just take a few moments to go through a few slides to highlight some of the more critical audit areas, during the audit this year, and some of the procedures we perform, and just kind of close out the communication loop to you as a committee. So, as I said on page 5, there are no significant issues to report. There were no unusual transactions. We already touched upon the fact that there were no audit misstatements or things of that nature. When you look at the financial statements themselves, the accounting standards, obviously it's GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and the associated pronouncements that they put out. That's what's adopted. But I think the other thing is to point out the consistency compared to the prior year, as well as policies as they're adopted. Sometimes there's different ways to go about it. What EFC does is consistent with what we see at other similar agencies within the state of New York and beyond the borders of New York. So the kind of the accounting customs that are employed are consistent with what we see throughout the industry, and certainly are consistent with the standards. There were no new accounting pronouncements that were adopted this year that had a material effect on the financial statements. There were a couple of pronouncements, one related to compensated absences, another one that was targeted at improving certain footnote disclosures. Obviously, the footnote disclosure one wouldn't have an effect on the financial statements themselves and didn't have an effect on the footnotes. And in terms of compensated absences, the accrual necessary for compensated absences was substantially already accrued, under leading up to 2025. So that new standard didn't have an effect on the financials. And so another way of saying it, there were no standards that were adopted that affected the financials. So again, consistent with the prior year, not a lot of changes from that perspective if you're looking through the financials of the notes. So from a comparability perspective, it's fairly consistent. In terms of slide number 6, there were we'll have a slide that talks about illegal acts and frauds. It's a significant audit area for us. There were no matters to report from that perspective. Moving along, page 7 just highlights some aspects of our audit report and significant policies. We've touched on that already. On slide 8, I'll touch on this. before I hand it over to Allie to go through some of the more detailed areas. As I mentioned before, a significant audit area for us and all audits under our professional standards is the risk of management override of internal control. That's essentially the risk of fraud in manipulating the financial statements that are prepared. So we're, as auditors, expected to design a number of procedures to address that risk, which we have. It includes obtaining all the journal entries that are recorded during the year, proving that we can roll forward the ledger itself from the beginning of the year to the end of the year with those entries, that we have a complete population, and then performing tests over those entries, selecting samples, looking for entries that might be higher risk, recorded at times of the day that might be unusual, or have a description in the description area of an entry that is seems unusual or is blank. A host of things. Obviously, testing journal entries at the end of the year or to accounts that aren't often used to see if there's anything unusual or suspicious, perhaps. As a result of all those procedures, we didn't identify anything that gave us pause, was unusual, or certainly, suggested some sort of inappropriate financial reporting or fraud or things of that nature. So nothing to report from that perspective, which again is good. If there ever was, of course, as you can imagine, we would have communicated that through the appropriate channels well before this point. So with that, I'll pause. If there's any questions, I'd happy to answer those. And if not, we'll hand it over to Allie in the room to take a few minutes just to highlight a few other audit areas before we wrap it up.
Thanks, Marty. So going over page 9 starts with our business process areas, what we performed over each of those areas. The key is that we did present on these back in the fall, or I guess it was just a couple months ago at this point, right? And the key is that we did not have any changes from our plan. Everything went accordingly, and we didn't have to adjust our procedures in any way, which is a testament to Albert and Chris and their team's hard work. So just to touch on what we perform for cash and investments, we do confirm all cash and investment accounts with the third party, obtain those, make sure that agrees to management's recording, and ensure that they're properly presented within the financial statements. There is, as V72 is a leveling table that isn't within the financial statements, so we make sure that what was confirmed is properly presented within that footnote as well. As it relates to bonds receivable and bonds payable, similar process where we confirm with either the town, the county, whoever the receivable is with, and then in terms of the payable, we will confirm with the financial institution, M&T, to make sure that those balances, again, recorded, within management's records, agree to what the institutions have on their books. As it relates to OPEB, I'm saying the word confirmation here a lot. We also confirm with Macleod Watts on the amounts that are recorded within the financial statements, of making sure that the information in the actuarial report that's received from Macleod Watts is still what they have on the books, and it agrees to the financial statements as well. They also do confirm census data information for us. We, as part of our testing of the estimate, will perform census data testing, where we will use an Alteryx compare engine to make sure that if there's any changes in the population year over year, or I guess 2 years over year, that we're testing those. And with those samples, we'll include that in our confirmation to Macleod Watts to make sure that the information that we are using for our testing agrees to what they have within their system as well. As it relates to slide number 11 here, for any grant income and expenditures, we will select a statistical sample of those entries and vouch that to either the receipt or the expense of that grant award. And then similarly to what Marty said, for all of those areas, we will make sure that our testing supports the financial statements and that they appropriately tie to the financial statements and internally within the financial statements as well. We do, as Marty said, conduct inquiries with lead senior management and make sure that, any information, any risks that we should be aware of, any processes that might have changed, that we're aware of, just in case we do have to adjust our audit approach as well. And we have confirmed that there are no significant subsequent events that we should be aware of either. And then on to slide 12. The next two slides go into detail some of the accounting estimates that we have identified as significant as part of our audit. There are several accounting estimates that could be within the financial statements. However, these are the ones that we have identified as significant. First is as it relates to investments, there's an inherent risk of valuation uncertainty there. So management does use FT Interactive and Wilmington Trust to value their investments. And so what we do on our side is we have a centralized pricing desk that has access to several terminals to ensure that the price that is being recorded by management is appropriate. So they independently price all of the investments that are on management's books and make sure that what is recorded is appropriate. So
There's some range in there that
Yes,
has to fall in.
Exactly.
We're well within that.
Right, correct. So for each investment, we use the CUSIP number. We'll send it to our pricing desk. They'll come back, give us all very helpful information, and then they will give us a range of which the price should fall in. And if it doesn't fall within that range, we would have to do some further, inquiries and things like that to make sure that we feel comfortable with the way that it's valued. But we didn't, had very insignificant number that came back with that. It was less than our posting threshold, so we didn't need to really do much further information on that. But everything came back, very, well valued. And
So FT Interactive is the system that we use.
Yeah, so that's an independent
It's
pricing
an
service that we
independent service that
our
we,
database.
system we use.
Yep.
And then you check it with another system and away we go.
We also reconcile the prices that we
Yeah.
pull from FT Interactive to what our trustee has.
Actuals, yeah.
So there's kind of three
Layers of
Three
checks in
layers.
there and actuals are in there as well. Yep. Cool. Thank you.
And then if there's no other questions, the second significant estimate we have, I touched on, was OPEB liability. There is, again, an inherent valuation risk as it relates to that, as there are several assumptions that go into that, actuarial valuation that McLeod Watts does. So we independently have our own actuary at KPMG that will review the significant assumptions that we have identified here and make sure that the assumptions used by McLeod Watts are appropriate based on industry standard, based on GASB 75, and making sure that the ultimate valuation of that significant estimate is appropriate. And he did not identify any issues as it relates to that. Any questions?
We used to spend so much more time talking about OPED. I think we just, we now understand it. It was sort of a surprise. I think at some point, I remember it was like, that's such a big number. How does it? And I think now we understand why it's, significant number. But for this place, it's not, it doesn't seem like a crazy number for this corporation.
No, I think in 2019, we adopted GASB 75. So
Yeah.
there was a big,
Right.
a big hit to probably everyone's net.
That's exactly right. Exactly.
That time.
Yeah.
Great.
Took a while to get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's explained and we understand it. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I remember those days.
Yep.
And then I think the accounting behind it all was to, get some of these things that were kind of pay as you go onto the books,
Right.
similar to what a commercial enterprise does. And as you said, Charles, it took a little bit of time to all of us to collectively wrap our heads around that. In a lot of respects. So as I look across the remaining slides, we do have a little something here on that slide 14, I think, for the management discussion analysis. As I said earlier, we do make sure that ties out and is consistent with the information that we're going through as part of our financial statement audit. So no issues to report from that perspective. There is a new standard that'll be coming out down the line in the next year or so, I think that it kind of gets into, or maybe it's something a little bit further down next year, but that gets into, kind of targeted improvement to management discussion analysis, industry-wide. It shouldn't be a significant change, but there might be a chance that the MD&A might get a little bit more expansive than it presently is. I guess that's the heads up, but more to come on that from that perspective. The last slide that I wanted to just touch on for a brief moment is slide 15. It says required inquiries, and this is really more, as I've said before, a memory jogger for folks on the committee, certainly management, everyone, that, when we're conducting our audit, if there's any concerns with respect to, as because it becomes a cliche term, fraud, waste, abuse, but certainly any inappropriate activities as it relates to financial reporting, but certainly otherwise, to feel free to knock on our doors as the auditors. It's important for us to have that visibility and contemplate what that means in the context of an audit and our reporting requirements. And certainly if we identify anything, as I said earlier, we would report that to you. Charlie and I have our ability to connect and certainly a two-way dialogue if there's any concerns from that perspective. As I said before, nothing came up as during the conduct of our audit this year that certainly was concerning or anything of that nature. So with that concludes what Allie and I were intending to cover from our slides. There's some other slides here that are more for informational purposes. This might be a good opportunity if there's any questions or what have you from folks there in the room or online that they'd like to cover with us. We'd be happy to go through that.
So thank you, Marty. This is Charlie. This last slide is almost a segue. Later on, we'll be talking about the internal audit function. If we'll be discussing that. We have to every year. But this last slide is a sort of a reminder of, in a different world, this slide we'd be acting, we'd be talking, to each other, or we'd be talking about an internal audit function. But no, in the world we're in now at EFC, happily, again, you talk about the slide, but there's really, to my knowledge, nothing to talk about, after knowing all the avenues of discussion and inquiry and, cross-check. So thanks for the full report and your analysis, but also your impressions. So if there are any questions from anybody about anything that Allie or Marty have talked about or mentioned coming up? Peter.
Yeah, I always like to see what the regulations are coming up with GASB 102, certain risk disclosures. Does any of that include cyber risks as we're moving through? How does cyber work into the systems that we use? How does that, I know it's on the numbers that you're checking, but how does any type of systems access or certain risk disclosures, does any of that include that risk of cyber influences, attacks, or whatever? I don't want to use attacks, but just cyber overall.
Sure. Great question, and I think it's a healthy dialogue. From a financial statement audit perspective, we don't have cyber in the scope of a financial statement audit and in a way that would kind of help identify if there's something going on or if there's a gap per se. What we do is we're required to make inquiries regarding any IT. First off, we have to make sure we have an understanding of the IT environment, which we do. If there's been any changes in the environment or any material changes in a given year, and make sure that there, are reasonable policies in place. We don't test those policies or rely on the internal controls in the context of our financial statement audit. And then more specifically, as I was mentioning, as it relates to cyber, we make specific targeted inquiries as to whether there are any were there any attacks during a given year? If there were, what was the response? What's been done? Typically, if there was something of a significant or some higher level magnitude, we would typically then incorporate a response, an audit response to that, so that we would make sure that there wasn't an effect on the financials and the information that we're auditing. Maybe could somehow corrupt the information that we're trying to audit. But it kind of ends there. And having said that, but as part of those inquiries, we do get an understanding as to, all right, what is the organization doing as it relates to cyber monitoring? Are there third-party vendors that are hired periodically to do some sort of assessment of the policies, procedures, occasional penetration testing, things of that nature, to make sure that there isn't, this isn't a blind spot, so to speak. So it's not, that isn't really, in the scope of our audit, per se, from that perspective. And when that GASB, coming down the line, that's not really kind of speaking to that risk specifically. It's a little bit, different from a disclosure perspective.
Great.
Thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
I've got another question in the similar vein. The last 2 years, we've heard a fair amount in your audit about AI. And I'm wondering, you haven't mentioned it specifically, are you using AI in any way in the audit or in any way to assess, again, any of the even the things you just mentioned, Marty, in a new ways that you have this new tool?
Yeah, no, these are great hot topics. So as a firm, we've invested a lot of money into generative AI, across each of our different, functional silos, audit, tax, advisory. On the audit side, we've incorporated a lot of different, like I'll say, standardized, steps that you can opt into to enhance, let's say, documentation, the ability to summarize a document much faster, et cetera, as it relates to our audit here with EFC. And we've adopted it insofar as that. It's really helped improve our ability to document our test work. So when it comes to auditing, we're heavily regulated ourselves. We both have, and we obviously have our own internal inspection process that is ongoing all the time. But then we also have other firms that will come in and do a peer inspection to give, their feedback, and then we report to the standard setters on that. And then we also have the PCAOB, the SEC, and other regulatory bodies that come in and inspect. Certainly the feds do as well, as it relates to the federal programs that we're responsible for auditing. And based on all of that, we know that documentation of what we do is everything. And AI has really helped us improve that. Not only just summarizing, say, a document, but it provides, hey, here's what we've documented. Is there any considerations that we may have overlooked or questions that we should ask? And AI gives us ideas and gives us, some I'll say in very, layman's terms, helpful hints on how to improve what we've documented or connecting some of those sorts of dots, so to speak. So it really has become a little bit more of an internal quality improvement mechanism at the present moment, Charlie. We haven't quite gotten to the point where we're putting in, let's say, here's a population of, transactions, over a period of 5 years, and here's the current year's transactions. Tell us the tell us the 100 transactions that stand out as potentially high risk or, some sort of anomaly. We're not quite there in terms of the tools. Teams do that. And transaction scoring is what we refer to it as. It's a little less AI. It's a little bit more, kind of intelligent audit. Yeah. But having said that, it's something, the standardization of these tools, I would expect to continue to roll out over the period of the next handful of years, and teams will be using them in more targeted ways where it's kind of appropriate and makes sense. But certainly we have already started to adopt it. We have a closed environment. It's not the external web that we're using, for our generative AI, environment that we use. So it's closed from the outside, and we're not dumping loads of information into sensitive information, for example, into that. It tends to be a bit more, us kind of, as I said, coaching ourselves at this present juncture. But it is at the forefront of everything that we're doing, and there are a number of teams that are across the country test piloting on a regular basis, and I'm not saying by tens and dozens, but by the hundreds, different tools that we'll even anticipate rolling out to, help make the work that we do more intelligent. And not to go on and belabor this too long. One more soundbite though, the auditing standards themselves have not changed. So there's an expectation that we're still vouching to the underlying support of a transaction. We're still, selecting samples and all the tried and true procedures. So even though AI might come on the scene, it won't take away from the things that we still have to do. And so there'll always be that element. So it's almost like it's an additive. It will help identify potential unusual transactions in a lot of respects, or things that stand out. But at the end of the day, we still have to have that sufficient coverage. We still have to send those confirmations that Allie mentioned. We still have to test those prices and look at the inputs and assumptions that go into other estimates and models. So a lot of the work that we do won't change, certainly not dramatically in a lot of respects, unless the standard setters change along the way as well, which at this juncture they haven't quite gotten there.
The answer is yes.
Very interesting. Thank you. No, it's like you said, it's evolving. And thanks for telling us, how
It's interesting.
how it's used right now. That's really cool.
It is interesting.
Uh,
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions? You've got a very thorough job, Allie and Marty. Very helpful. Unless there are more questions.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Now we have the private consult with you guys, with management leaving the room, I think. Correct? Cool. So they're gonna give them 1 minute to leave the room, and we won't be long. I'm gonna take it. Great. Thank you. We're back in the audit committee. We've talked to management with the auditors without management in the room. Had a great conversation, totally positive, just completely consistent with what we were talking about in the committee meeting before, with all the questions and answers. We all appreciate the work done here, but specifically with Emily and Albert, Chris, the team here, just things are really well done. And again, KPMG really confirms that in detail, and the audit speaks for itself. Just appreciate the work, but also the anticipation of what's happening and the efficiency and the professionalism.
It's
So-
giving us so much confidence
Steady.
to, every
Really
year gives us a lot of confidence.
Yes. So thank you.
Thank
Thanks for your work. It's great. Very good.
I was going to say, it's not often you go to you're on a board and you get warm and fuzzy feelings when your auditors are talking, because you're
There
so
you go.
proud of the work
Right,
that
it's like so
your
confident.
staff and your committee are doing. So thank you, Paul.
Well, I take that as a compliment. Thank you.
It is, thank you.
That's right. Thank you. Great. So we will vote on or, take up the report from KPMG. That's the next thing, to just accept their report. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to propose to the full board that we accept the KPMG report as presented
And the financial statements. Thank you. Great.
and the financial.
Do we have a
statements.
second?
And I'll make a second.
Perfect. Thanks. Any discussion?
We're all very confident.
Great. I think that's right. And so,
Here.
so all in favor of accepting the KPMG report and financial statements of the corporation, and then we'll go to the full board later. Aye.
Me,
Great. Awesome.
Aye.
Abstentions or opposition? Nope. Terrific. Thank you for that. Great. We have to talk about the lead partner. There's a requirement in the law, Public Authorities Law 2802, policy guidance from the Authority Budget Office, that the lead partner on the audit or the partner responsible for reviewing the audit must be changed once every 5 years. Marty Dunbar is serving only as temporary stand-in for Jeff, beginning April 1, 2025. Jeff started his rotation as lead on April 1, 2023. Therefore, rotation of the lead partner is not required at this time. And now we have to talk about the internal audit function. We mentioned it before. Public Authorities Law 2932 and our charter says that every year we discuss the merits of or the desirability of having an internal audit function. We've talked about this every year. I'm open to anybody's thinking on this.
I think given the past years in the report and this year and our high confidence level and the conclusions of the audit report, it does not appear to be needed at this time again.
I concur, Chair. I have high confidence.
So do I. We've discussed it and we've decided not to take any action on that. Thank you. I will take a motion to adjourn.
I'll move that motion to adjourn.
Great. Second.
I will
Terrific.
second.
The second. All in favor of
Well done,
adjourning?
Chairman.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Aye.
Great.
Thank you.
Good meeting. Thank you. Thanks again.